My name is Lorraine Whitfield, and I'm 44 years old. Last Tuesday at 6 in the morning, I opened my front door to find my brother's 4 children standing on my porch in pajamas, the youngest clutching a stuffed elephant missing one eye, and a folded note taped to the storm door that read, in my brother's handwriting, "Back Sunday. Don't call." By the time I read those 3 words, his silver truck was already gone from the end of my street. I called his phone. It rang once, then nothing, straight to a powered-down signal. The youngest, Betrayal, who is 3, looked up at me and said, "Daddy said you have cereal." I need to explain how I got here, standing in my doorway in a bathrobe, suddenly responsible for 4 children I had not agreed to watch, with no car seats, no medications list, no emergency contacts beyond what I already knew from being their aunt. But first, let me tell you what happened when I called my parents 2 hours later, after I'd fed the kids and confirmed that my brother Dale had truly vanished. My mother picked up on the second ring, and before I could finish the first sentence, she said, "Lorraine, those children need stability. Just keep them until he gets back. You don't have anything else going on." That sentence, "you don't have anything else going on," landed in a place that had been bruised for 30 years. I am a phlebotomist at a hospital laboratory. I work rotating shifts, including overnights. I live alone in a 2-bedroom duplex. My life is not empty. It is structured around demanding work that I chose after putting myself through a certification program at 38. My mother has never once asked what my schedule looks like. She only knows that I am not married, that I do not have children, and that, in her mind, this makes my time a public resource. Dale is 39. He has 4 children by 2 women, neither of whom he married. The oldest, Jalen, is 12, then Marcus 9, then Kayla 6, then Betrayal 3. Dale has had full custody of all 4 since last year, when a family court determined both mothers had circumstances that made them unable to maintain safe primary custody. I don't know every detail of those proceedings, and it isn't my place to share what I do know. What matters is that Dale fought for custody, received it, and then, within 14 months, apparently decided he could drop them at my door like a FedEx package. He had done smaller versions of this before. Once he left the 2 older boys with me for a weekend without asking, claiming he'd texted and I must have missed it. Another time he brought all 4 over for an hour that turned into 9 while he went to a friend's house 40 minutes away. Each time, my parents treated it as though I should be grateful for the company. "Those kids love you," my father said once, as if that were the same as consent. Let me tell you about that Tuesday morning in detail, because the details matter. At 6:04 a.m., I had just finished a 12-hour overnight shift. I had gotten home at 5:45, showered, and was about to eat a bowl of soup and go to bed. My next shift started at 7 p.m. that night. When I opened the door, Jalen was holding Brielle's hand. Marcus had a backpack. Kayla had nothing, no bag, no shoes, just socks on my concrete porch. It was October and the morning was 47 degrees. "Dad said to come inside and be good," Jalen told me. His voice was calm but careful, the way a child speaks when they've been given instructions they didn't fully understand. I brought them inside. I found the note, I called Dale again, I texted Dale, I checked my messages, nothing from him in the past 72 hours. I made them toast and cereal. Betrayal asked for juice I didn't have. I gave her water in a coffee mug because I don't own sippy cups. I am not set up for children. I have never been set up for children. That is not a failing. It is a fact about my household. By 8 o'clock, I'd confirmed that Dale's phone was off. I called my mother. Her response, "Just keep them," was delivered in the same tone she uses when telling me to pick up milk if I'm already at the store. As if the request were minor, as if my agreement were assumed, as if the only possible inconvenience were emotional, not structural. "Mom," I said, "I work tonight. I work a 12-hour shift starting at 7. I cannot watch 4 children. I have no car seats. Betrayal is 3 years old. I don't even know if she has allergies." "She doesn't have allergies. Dale would have told you." "Dale didn't tell me anything. He left a 3-word note." "Well, that's just how he is." I want you to hear how she said that. Not with frustration, not with concern for the children. She said it the way you'd describe weather, neutrally, as an unchangeable condition. Dale is like that. The sky is blue. Don't bother being upset. Mom, I need someone to come get these kids by 5 o'clock today. Your father and I have the church retreat this week. We leave tomorrow morning. Then come today. She paused. Then, Lorraine, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Those babies need you right now. I didn't raise my voice. I was too tired. I said, I'm going to call you back, and I hung up. I sat at my kitchen table with toast crumbs from 4 children scattered across the surface and asked myself the question I should have asked years ago. Why is it always me? Why does just keep them always land at my address? Why does my refusal always register as cruelty, while Dale's abandonment registers as weather? I didn't have time to sit with that question. Kayla was asking about school. School. It was a Tuesday. 3 of the 4 children had school. I didn't know which schools, which bus routes, whether they'd been marked absent. I called Jalen over. He told me his school and Marcus's school, different buildings in the same district, 25 minutes from my house. Kayla attended a different school entirely, near Dale's apartment. None of them had their school supplies. Marcus didn't have shoes in his backpack, only clothes. Have you ever been forced into a decision where every option makes you look either negligent or compliant? Because that was my Tuesday morning. I called the schools. I identified myself as the children's aunt. I explained that their father had left them with me unexpectedly, and I could not transport them. I asked what their absence policy was. Both offices were polite but careful. They asked if the children were safe. I said yes. They asked if I was their emergency contact. I said I believed so but wasn't certain. They said they'd note the absence and asked me to call again if the situation continued. That phrase, if the situation continues, was the first moment I realized that this might not resolve by Sunday. I put the younger 2 in my bedroom with a tablet I borrowed from Jalen. I asked Jalen and Marcus to stay in the living room. I told Jalen I was going to sleep for a few hours because I'd worked all night, and I asked him to come get me if Brielle cried or anyone needed help. He nodded like this was normal. That broke something in me, the way a 12-year-old understood overnight shifts and adult exhaustion without needing it explained. I slept 3 hours. When I woke, Brielle had wet her clothes because she didn't know where my bathroom was and had been too shy to ask. Marcus had eaten the last of my bread. Kayla was sitting on the floor drawing on the back of an envelope. At 2 p.m., I called Dale again. Still off. At 3 p.m., I called my parents again. My father answered this time. Dad, I need help. I work tonight. I cannot leave 4 children alone in my house, and I cannot bring them to the hospital. Your mother said you'd handle it. I didn't agree to handle it. He sighed. Long, weighted, the kind of sigh that means I'm being difficult. Lorraine, we raised 5 kids. Your mother and I, we didn't complain. You chose to have 5 kids. I didn't choose this. Well, Dale's going through something. Dale left his children on a porch in October without shoes. Another pause. Then, what do you want us to do about it? I told him I needed someone to either come stay with the children tonight or take them to their house. He said they were packing for the retreat. He said maybe I could call off work. He said the kids were fine where they were. He said I was overreacting. I want to be honest here. For about 15 minutes after that phone call, I almost did it. I almost called off work, absorbed the attendance point, and said nothing else. That is what 30 years of conditioning does. It makes surrender feel like the path of least resistance. It makes compliance feel like love. But I had 8 attendance points out of 12 allowed. 1 more would trigger a written warning. 2 more after that, and I'd be eligible for termination. I'd already used points covering for a flooded apartment in August and a car repair in September. My job is not something I can casually risk. I don't have family money. I don't have a partner's income. I don't have a safety net. My paycheck is my net. At 4 p.m., I made a decision. I called my younger sister, Wanda. Wanda is 36, married, lives 40 minutes away. She has 2 kids of her own. She and I aren't close, but we aren't hostile. I told her the situation plainly. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "He did this last year to Cheryl, too. Left the boys for 4 days." "Cheryl is our oldest sister. I didn't know about that." "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked. "Because Mom said not to make a big deal out of it." That sentence hit differently than my mother's words. It wasn't a command, it was an explanation, a description of how our family functions. Don't make a big deal, don't name the problem, absorb it and move on. Wanda couldn't take all 4 kids, but she agreed to drive over and stay at my house Tuesday night so I could work my shift. She arrived at 5:30 with her own 2 kids and a bag of groceries. My 2-bedroom duplex now held 7 children and 1 adult. I worked my shift. I drew blood, labeled tubes, entered results, and thought about Brielle's face when she realized she'd wet herself. The shame, the smallness of her body standing in my hallway in damp leggings. Wednesday morning I came home to Wanda looking exhausted on my couch. Brielle had woken twice. Marcus had an asthma inhaler he needed at night and didn't have with him. Wanda had called Dale's apartment complex and asked a neighbor to check the unit. Nobody answered. "You need to call someone official," Wanda said. "I can't do tomorrow night." I sat with that. Calling someone official meant calling Child Protective Services. That is not something I take lightly. Dale has problems, immaturity, selfishness, a deep pattern of expecting women to cover for him, but I have never believed he harms his children. Neglect through absence, though, is still neglect, and these children were now in a home without their medications, without their school supplies, without confirmed supervision past Wednesday. I called Dale's phone one more time. Off. I texted him, "Dale, I need to hear from you by 5 p.m. today. If I don't, I will contact family services. The kids need their medication. This isn't a game." No response. At 5:15, I called my mother to tell her what I planned to do. She erupted. "You are not calling the state on your own brother. Do you know what that could do to him? They could take those kids away permanently." "Mom, he left them without medication." "Then go to his apartment and get the medication." "I don't have a key to his apartment. I don't have car seats for Brielle or Kayla. I cannot transport them legally or safely." "You're looking for excuses, Lorraine. I'm describing reality. If you call CPS, you are done with this family." She said it flatly. Not screaming, flat. A statement of consequence delivered like a contract clause. I felt my chest tighten in the old way, the way it tightened at 14 when I was told I was selfish for wanting to go to summer camp instead of watching my younger siblings. The way it tightened at 22 when I moved into my own apartment and my mother didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. I did not call CPS that night. I want to be honest about that. I hesitated. I was afraid, not of my mother's threat exactly, but of what it would mean to be the person who made that call. In our family, calling outside authorities is treated as the ultimate betrayal. Worse than leaving children on a porch. Worse than disappearing. The hierarchy of sins in my family has never made sense, but it is deeply enforced. What I did instead? I called Dale's apartment complex office Thursday morning. I explained I was the children's aunt, that their father was unreachable, and that the children needed their belongings and medication. The property manager was sympathetic but said she couldn't let me into the unit without authorization from the leaseholder. She suggested I file a police welfare check. I called the non-emergency line. I requested a welfare check on Dale's apartment. Not on the children who were safe with me, but on Dale himself, because he had been unreachable for over 48 hours. The officer who responded called me back an hour later. No one was home, no signs of distress. His truck was not in the lot. Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Dale. "Hey," he said, as if he were returning a casual missed call. "Where are you?" "I'm in Myrtle Beach. I needed a break." I stood in my kitchen holding my phone, and my hand was shaking, not from anger alone, but from the sheer audacity of his calm. He needed a break from his children, and his solution was to abandon them without warning, without supplies, without medical information, without consent from the person he left them with. "Dale, Marcus doesn't have his inhaler. He'll be fine without it for a few days. He barely uses it." "He used it last night. Wanda said he was wheezing." "Wanda's there too. See, you have help." Wanda came because I begged her. I work nights, Dale. I didn't agree to this. Look, I'll be back Sunday like I said. Can you just chill? No, I can't chill. Bring me Marcus's medication information or tell me his pharmacy so I can pick up his inhaler. He gave me the pharmacy name. Then he said, "Don't tell Mom you called the cops." I didn't call the cops. I called a welfare check because you disappeared. Same thing. She'll freak out. She already knows everything. She told me to just keep them. Good, so keep them. I hung up. I drove to the pharmacy. They couldn't release the inhaler to me without being listed as an authorized pickup. I called Dale back. He didn't answer for 4 hours. When he finally responded by text, he gave me the information I needed to call his pediatrician's office and explain the situation. The office called in a new inhaler prescription that I could pick up under my name as a temporary emergency measure. It cost me $47. Let me ask you something. At what point does helping family become something else entirely? At what point does your love for 4 children become a lever that other adults use to avoid their own responsibilities? By Friday, I had spent $112 on food, $47 on medication, and used 2 attendance points at work. One for arriving late Wednesday because Wanda left at 5 a.m., and I had to wait for the kids to wake before I could leave them with Jalen briefly while I arranged a neighbor check-in. The second point was for Thursday when I left early to handle the pharmacy situation. I also learned something on Friday that changed my understanding. Wanda called me. She said, "I talked to Cheryl. Apparently the last time Dale did this, Mom and Dad knew in advance. He told them he was going away and asked them to cover. They told him to leave the kids with Cheryl because she was closest and didn't work Fridays." I was silent for 10 seconds. "They planned it," I said. "Not exactly. They agreed it was fine. They didn't tell Cheryl ahead of time because they thought she'd say no." Let me make sure you understand what this means. My parents knew that Dale intended to leave his children. They knew the person receiving them had not consented. They participated in the deception by choosing not to warn the caregiver, because warning her would have given her the power to refuse. This time, they hadn't warned me. The church retreat was already scheduled. They'd known they wouldn't be available. And rather than tell Dale he couldn't go, or offer to adjust their own plans, they'd let it happen and told me to absorb it. My mother's phrase, "You don't have anything else going on," wasn't dismissive in the way I first heard it. It was strategic. She'd already assessed that I was the easiest target. Not because I'm idle, but because I'm alone. No husband to complain, no children whose routine would be disrupted, no visible schedule that they respect. On Saturday, I made a decision. I sat at my kitchen table after the kids were asleep, Jalen and Marcus sharing my bedroom, Kayla on the couch, Brielle in a makeshift crib arrangement I'd built from a laundry basket and blankets that I knew wasn't safe but was the best I had. And I wrote an email. I wrote it to Dale, CC'd my mother, my father, Wanda, and Cheryl. I said, "This is a formal statement that I did not consent to care for Dale's children this week. I am documenting the following. The children were left without advance notice, without medication, without school supplies, without appropriate clothing, and without my agreement. I have incurred $159 in expenses and 2 work attendance points. I love these children. I am not their parent, and I am not an emergency resource that can be activated without my knowledge or consent. Going forward, I will not accept responsibility for Dale's children unless I have agreed in writing at least 48 hours in advance. The children arrive with all necessary medication and supplies, and the arrangement has a confirmed end time. Any future instance of children being left at my home without my prior written agreement will result in me contacting family services to ensure proper care coordination. This is not a threat, it is a boundary." I sent it at 11 p.m. Saturday night. By 7 a.m. Sunday, my phone had 14 messages. My mother, "You've humiliated this family." My father, "That email was unnecessary and disrespectful." Dale, "Wow, dramatic much?" Cheryl, "I understand why you did it, but you should have talked to them privately." Wanda, "I'm staying out of it." My mother again, You could have just said no next time. That last message, you could have just said no next time, stopped me cold. Because I had said no. I'd said no when I told her I worked nights. I'd said no when I told her I didn't have car seats. I'd said no when I told her I couldn't handle this. Each time, my no had been reclassified as a complaint rather than a refusal. The email made it uncollectible. It existed in writing, sent to all parties, time-stamped. It couldn't be paraphrased into, Lorraine said she was a little tired but she managed fine. It said what it said. Dale arrived at my house Sunday at 2 p.m. to collect the kids. He didn't apologize. He said, "You didn't have to send that email to everybody." Jalen hugged me at the door. Marcus said thank you. Kayla asked if she could come back next weekend. Brielle didn't say anything. She was holding the stuffed elephant and looking at Dale like she wasn't entirely sure he was real. I knelt down and said, "You are welcome here anytime your daddy and I plan it together, okay?" She nodded. Dale loaded them into his truck, car seats present this time I noticed, which means he'd had them all along, and left. My mother didn't speak to me for 3 weeks after that email. When she finally called, her first words were, "Are you done being angry?" Not, "I'm sorry," not, "that shouldn't have happened," just, "Are you done?" I said, "I'm not angry, Mom. I set a boundary. Those are different things." A boundary doesn't need to involve the whole family. It does when the whole family participates. She didn't respond to that. Here is what happened in the months that followed. Dale did not leave his children with me again unannounced. He did ask once, 3 months later by text, 2 weeks in advance for one night with all supplies provided, while he attended a work-related event. I said yes. The children came. They had their bags. Brielle had her inhaler. She'd developed mild asthma too, and I noticed he'd packed it without being asked. The night went fine. He picked them up the next morning at 9, and he said, "Thanks, Lorraine," in a tone that wasn't warm exactly but was no longer resentful. My mother and I have not returned to normal. I don't think we will. What we have now is functional but thin. Surface conversations about weather, about the children's school milestones, about nothing that requires honesty. She has not acknowledged what she did. I don't expect her to. What I expect is that she won't do it again, and so far she hasn't. The cost of that email was significant. I lost 3 weeks of contact with my mother, which I survived. I lost the comfortable fiction that my family saw me as a person rather than a resource. I lost the ability to pretend that helping was something I chose freely each time. But I gained something I hadn't had in decades, a clear line between love and labor. I still see the kids. I took Jalen to a bookstore last month for his birthday. I keep juice boxes in my refrigerator now, not because I'm required to, but because I want Brielle to have something she likes when she visits. The difference between those two reasons might seem small from the outside, but from where I stand, it's everything. The stuffed elephant is still missing one eye. Last time Brielle brought it over, I offered to sew a button on for the missing eye. She said no, she likes it the way it is. She said it can still see fine with one eye, it just has to turn its head a little. I think about that sometimes, about turning your head to see clearly, about how you can function with something missing but only if you know it's missing. My family operated for years with one eye closed, the eye that would have seen how much they took from the women who said yes too quietly. I opened mine. The view isn't always comfortable, but it's accurate. If someone in your life treats your time, your space, and your consent as optional, if no only counts when you scream it, and even then gets rewritten as drama, I want you to know that a boundary is not an attack. It is a door with a lock. You're allowed to have one. What would you do if someone left their responsibilities at your door and expected your silence to mean yes?